Good morning. I'm so glad you're here. That I know that there are a couple of you that stayed for this class too. I had them in the previous class, and that's so awesome. Um, the next PowerPoint is going to be how do we counter-react racial trauma in the classroom. And Danielle, you want to put up the PowerPoint, hon, please? Okay. Everyone sees that? All right. So my name is Esperanze Donovan Penzick. I am a school adjustment counselor for the city of Worcester. I work with the new citizen centers, which it means that the kids that I work with have a lot of issues and trauma coming from another country, and psychological support is critical for their learning. So this is where I was asked if I could do this workshop, and I said yes, that this is very important for teachers to understand that if the kid doesn't feel comfortable and safe in your classroom, that they're not going to learn. And Melissa, you heard that before, right? And Melanie, you heard that from the other class. So I'm asking you to please, if you have any concerns or any questions, you're always welcome to just ask the question. And if something comes up at you and you just want to discuss it, you're welcome to do so. So when we talk about internalized racial oppression, we talk about the nature of oppression that creates trauma, the process of internal oppression, and cycles of racial oppression. Go ahead, Danielle. The next slide, please. Psychological trap for childhood to adulthood. This is very important, very, very important. The fear of differences between people of color and the self-image. Only white, blue eye, blonde hair are attractive. The stereotype of the dominant culture reinforces that people of color are inferior and not attractive. Prejudice. No one opens the door of opportunity for African American or people of color in the educational system and the health system and judicial system. D, internalized oppression is psychological humiliation and the repeat of a vicious cycle, the cycle of repression and oppression. Okay, so one of the things that I always talk about to teachers is how do you make your child or your students feel comfortable? Well, there is what you call racial oppression. And racial oppression in our students and also with our teachers feel that we're not beautiful enough, we're not accepted enough because of the color of our skin, the way we have an accent, or that we're different because we either gay or lesbian, or we just have issues at home, we're poor. So some of these kids and most of the kids, minority children and minority teachers, feel that they're trapped in a racial racial world in which judge us and in which we become the image of inferiority. So let's go to the next slide, Danielle, please. Hemology is the process of social control that carries out by using unfounded moral assumption and leadership as the dominant social cultural class is subordinate to the group. And I just want to let you know that all the all the articles and names of the books that I utilize for my slides are going to be in your folder. So you can take it when you have a minute or two and read through the articles. So the Hemology is the process that demystifies and is asymmetrical power relation between social arrangement that sustains the interest of the ruling class, which means if you're not white, blue eye, blonde hair, or red hair, you don't belong. That's what it means. If you are of the ruling class, which you are accepted because your skin is light, you speak English well without an accent, or you don't have feelings of you're straight, then you are accepted, and therefore you're part of the culture, the dominant culture. The dominant culture class becomes embedded upon subordinate group, creating ideological views that matter to the dominant group. And Donovan, of course, is me. I did my dissertation, my doctorate, I did it on dominance and culture and how the Latino community learns into a system that is racially impacted. The next slide, Danielle, please. Nature of racial oppression that creates trauma. Racial trauma and cycles of oppression creates experiences in which children in subordinate group of people can live in a near constant state of flight or fight and anxiety. That, if you take a look at that sentence, right? That crazy thought right there that I just put in, it says that oppression doesn't become just physical, but it becomes emotional. It does not allow your brain to grow, to connect. The neurons in your brain does not feel safe enough to learn and to feel comfortable about what we do in our lives, because we're constantly reminded that we have a skin color, that we look like somebody that is not a part of the culture. You don't belong because you don't have blue eyes, blonde hair, and red hair, or you're Catholic, or you're not, you are Muslim, therefore you don't belong. This is what happens. The stress and the hormone of cortisol and adrenaline repeats flows in the brain, saturating and overwhelming the neurons, triggering intense emotional fear. Early racial trauma experience causes fear and anxiety and changes the structural brain. What does that mean? It means that fear changes the structure of your brain. You can no longer learn and you can no longer feel at ease. So your students of color are constantly waiting for the teachers or the administrators to suspend you, to target you, to make sure that you are reminded constantly that because you're different, you are going to be targeted. And if you don't walk a straight line with all the cultural acceptance, you're not going to feel that you belong in the classroom or in that school system. Racism in the United States is conducive to trauma. Repeated condition of hunger, poverty, fear, and anxiety heightens the state of awareness, activating the limbic system, flooding the brain with hormones, and it damages the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. What does that mean? It means that, unfortunately, racism affects our children, affects our teachers. And our frontal cortex, which is right here in front of our faces, right here, right in this area, becomes very afraid of learning new things. Why? Because we're waiting for someone to target us. So therefore, the limbic system becomes overused because, again, we're afraid. The hippocampus, which is the connecting highway in our brain from the back to the front and the front to the back, is now becoming smaller and narrower. So the information does not go up and down that it should be. So therefore, when we're talking about racial targeting and trauma repeatedly in the classroom, is because our children, our students, our teachers of color do not feel comfortable and safe enough. How about the next slide, Danielle? The process of internal oppression. Oppression points to social forces that tend to press on people and holding them down. This is Fryer in 1983. This is not new, guys. This is not new. Blocking them from achieving their right to happiness and equality under the law. Driving while Black. How many of you have talked to your kids, especially, you know, people, parents, Black parents and brown parents have talked to the people about be careful with the police, brutality. And not only that, but when you're driving, when you're learning to drive, you tend to believe, oh my God, they're gonna stop my kid because he's Black or because he's Latino, okay? Racial inferiority is based on a deliberate lie. When they take a look at someone that is different because of our skin color or our accent or the way we tend to learn culture, it tells you, oh my God, he or she is inferior because they don't understand our ways. And therefore, when you're Black or you're Latino, especially Black, the Black groups, they tend to deliberately send a message that you're not smart enough. How about the next slide, Danielle? Racial psychological free thinking theory. Banks. This is an author that has produced amazing articles. I wish that you could look at it. Awareness of Oppression by Freire from 1990. I love Paulo Freire. He is my hero because in South America, what we do is that the school is the community and the community is the school. So there is no difference between a system that divides the kids. We are all together in one set mind. And the set mind is, how do we make our kids and our families feel that they belong, so we can all learn together to do what we need to do to not only survive, but to achieve our goals. Recognize how oppression impacts our children and adults, inserting dysfunctional to create separation of one's self-identity. And that's what in my dissertation, that's what I talk about, is how we create self-identity based on the messages we get from the system, the educational system, and not only the educational system, but also the judicial system, that we are minorities, therefore something is wrong with us. And of course, I don't know if you have watched TV or, watch TV or watch different things, but if you think about how many times the African American is the evil character in a movie, or everything that is bad is Black, or things like that, the identity, oh my God, all Mexicans and Latinos are rapists, and we are all here because we want to steal jobs. All of that political side is a part of of making sure that our children, that our families get the message that we don't belong. This is important. Why? Because if we feel that we don't belong, we're not gonna have the identity to place ourselves and say, I want better. The reason that the kids don't do that in the classroom is because they're afraid. And when there is fear, there is no new learning. So I think that's my slides, right, Danielle? All right. So let's talk about what you learned right now in this session. I want this to be an interactive classroom. And I know that every one of you somehow or the other have had experience what is like to be different than others. Even white teachers that help and protect the kids, other teachers are going to title them as, oh, he's a too-gooder. What do we care? And you feel like you don't belong. So I open up the class so we can all discuss what you've seen in my slides and whether or not you agree, disagree, and if you have questions or concerns, let's bring it up and talk about it. Go ahead, Melissa. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
I really just grabbed onto a point that you had just recently brought up. So students in the classroom, they are fearful to speak up for themselves or bring up concerns in the classroom because they are not in a position of power in that setting. Especially with, traditional teaching, it's I am teacher, I am God, you do what I say, sit there and learn. And the students traditionally have not had the voice to bring up, maybe if they're feeling like, something unjust or perhaps maybe even favoritism in the classroom, they don't feel like they can say that.
Mm-hmm.
Something I've been trying to implement more, and just for background, I'm an elementary music teacher. So this year in particular has been a bit difficult because my classes have gone from 45 minutes to 30 and it's all remote. So I haven't seen any of my kids in person this year, but like really trying to give them more opportunities to tell me their opinions, to let's do a share. What's the news? What's going on? How are you? Giving them choices. All right, which song do you want to do today? Trying to incorporate more choice so that they feel that their voice is important in the direction of the class. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, despite this year being kind of a dumpster fire in terms of just everything,
Mm-hmm.
I'm really learning a lot just by relying on the students more to speak up and have a voice during class, even if there's not as much time for that.
Right, right. And engagement is a big thing with our classes right now. And when we were in the classroom face to face, teaching face to face, the whole thing, though, Melissa, I want to be very honest with you, is that the systems like the MTA and the educational system has not given white teachers or all teachers, not only white, but all teachers, a way of learning skills building in regards of how do you try to engage a kid that is different, a kid that his skin color is darker, a kid who has issues with suicide or has issues with whatever it is. What is it that we need to do, especially in the MTA, right? To give teachers the skills that they need so they can engage every single child in their classroom. Not only that, but to also support other teachers who are trying to do their best to engage with their kids, with their students. Is that helpful? Does that answer your question, Melissa? Okay, awesome. Anybody else? Oh, I see Isabel Barros. Isabel, what do you have to say?
I love that you called on me.
Oh, it's okay. I'm a teacher too.
No, I really appreciated this conversation. I went to the first session with you as well. And as an educator of color, I think a lot about how, and I am currently a dean of students, so I'm not directly in the classroom, but I get students in my office when something happens in the classroom. And oftentimes I'm asking them what's happened, and students are saying to me, it's not the kids, it's the adult in the room that's not listening to me, that's not hearing me or giving me time. And I think it's this balancing act of like, teaching needs to happen, right? But then also relationships need to happen with students, and how do we make both of those things happen so that students feel seen and heard, right? And that conflict isn't always occurring in the classroom.
Right. So Isabel, in the class, I just want to share this with you. The fact that I am a doctor today in education, I have a doctorate and 2 master's degrees, and the fact that I speak 6 languages and I'm tricultural is not just my parents that they did that. It's the influence of one teacher that believed in me. That teacher looked at me and said, you are going to change the world. And I thought, she says that to everybody. But you know what? She embraced me and she showed me that I can go forward in life and become whoever I want to be because she believed in me. She didn't see the fact that I was an Arab, or she didn't see the fact that I was Latino, or that I was a woman, or that my nose is bigger than my whole face, or my black hair intimidated her, or the fact that I could not speak English or I have an accent. She believed in me. And because she believed in me, she made the classroom safer. She made me feel like I belong in her class. And I could not wait to see her every day just to give her a hug and say, I'm dying to see you tomorrow. And she said, yes, me too, me too. And that sharing, that relationship is valuable for those kids who feel threatened, for those kids who do not do well in a normal classroom setting. Rani, what do you think about that? Are you there, hon? I'm gonna call upon you guys.
Can I ask a follow-up to that comment?
Sure.
Because I love that you had a teacher that believed in you, but how do we get that for it to be all of your teachers and not just one teacher, right? My school, I'm in Somerville Public Schools, and we're doing a lot of equity work in our district, and some teachers are, like addition, subtraction, and equity work, and some teachers are doing, geometry and equity work, if that's a way to describe it. And some teachers will email me and say, hey, I sent the same email or a similar email to 2 different sets of parents, one white family, one family of color. How was my response? And I'll tell them, your tone was very strong and demanding for the parents of color, but you were very understanding for the white parents. And some teachers are doing that, right? But not all of our teachers, even though we're all engaging in the same work. So how do we get to a place where I'm not having arguments or fights with teachers, but also pushing them a little bit more than gently to get to a place of understanding that their students need that?
Isabel, let me share something with you. The reason why teachers do things like that is because they feel themselves attacked by what they cannot understand. And at the same time, they feel guilt, right? Because now we're telling them, listen, they hear this message. I need to be better. I need to be blind to the cultural thing that is going on. But the bottom line is, a lot of the white teachers who do not have the skills to work with kids of color or families of color, they tend to feel afraid. So my first step for you, Isabel, is to connect with those teachers and ask them, have a relationship with them and ask them, what is it that you fear the most from your students? And why do you fear them? Why do you fear your students of color? And I know that takes a lot, Isabel. It takes a lot, because the bottom line is we can talk to kids about it. We can have a relationship with our kids, because we, as teachers, right, the first thing we want to do is protect them, is embrace them. But the bottom line is, how do you do that same thing with teachers? Is that help at all, Isabel?
It is helpful. Thank you so much.
Just remember that teachers are humans, and they have this thing that they already believe that they need to teach math and English and ELL and whatever it is, right? But we don't see the kids and the families as humans. And what happens is that we don't see white teachers as humans too. So what we tend to do is push them and fight against them, instead of trying to understand what is it that we should do as a group of teachers, educators, to raise together, to bring our kids together, to educate our kids in a dynamic way together. I hope that helps, Isabel.
It is. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anybody else?
Gabby had a question in the chat about how old you were when that teacher impacted your life.
I was 12, middle school.
All right. And then
I could never do, I was failing school. And that's because, let me share this with you. Spanish was not my first language. It was Arabic. So when I went to a Spanish school in Venezuela, in South America, guess what? I could not speak Spanish. So I was petrified. My brain could not process the information, right? But then this teacher believed in me, and she pushed me and said, you're going to change the world. And because you're going to change the world, I know that you're going to be the best and the best of the best. And she took upon herself for every day to check in with me and have that relationship, a give and take relationship. And I just loved her. And because she believed in me, I went forward.
Thank you. All right. And then there was another question in the chat, and I think it'd probably be better if you read it. It's a comment from Rachel Martin.
I cannot see it, hon. I don't. Danielle, can I see the chat?
Oh, I can read it to you if you'd like.
Sure. If you could, that would be awesome.
All right. So it's Rachel is saying, I struggle with teaching history. For example, we just celebrated Columbus Day. We now know that he was not a man who should be celebrated. We need better supports in teaching accurate history in a developmentally appropriate way that is not offensive and that's truthful.
And my question to her is, when you teach this, do you tell your kids that? Do you tell your kids that history was not wrong? The history that you learned was came from their view, the winners. The winners always write history, right? And if we understand what happened, and we are targeting our kids because we believe that was the right thing to do, then we're doing them damage, and we're doing ourselves damage, because it does not allow the relationship to continue and grow. But you have to say that. What was her name, Ashanta?
That's Rachel. She's unmuted.
Rachel.
Yeah, I just
Okay.
unmuted myself. So I teach pre-K.
Okay.
So I teach pre-K. Last year, I was a paraprofessional in a kindergarten classroom.
Okay.
And the teacher focused on the ships and the gold and Spain. And the whole time in my mind, I'm thinking this man was a monster. Like, she's trying to explain. I don't know. I was just like, I'm not going to teach it that way. And in, this year when it came and went, I really didn't teach anything. I didn't know what to say. I just said it's a holiday because we celebrate the day that our country was found on the map. Basically, that's why I didn't mention the man. I didn't mention the history, but I teach 4-year-olds. So I just don't even know where to start. And then, Martin Luther King Jr. Day is coming up in January. And I feel a little bit more prepared to talk about him. I have some books and things because he was a good person from history. But how do you talk about the lasting legacy of the civil rights movement and what's still happening with 4-year-olds in a developmentally appropriate way, that doesn't offend or trigger or, it's just really difficult. It's really difficult.
Rachel, let me put my clinician hat right now. The best thing you can do for your kids is to process that information with them. Okay. And processing it does not mean that you say it was good or bad, but just tell them the fact. He came this year. He came with three ships, right? And because of that, this is what happened. And I know that they're 4 years old, right? So the only thing they're going to understand is the way you love them without the difference, that we are all here to support each other, to love each other, to help each other out. And that message needs to be given to all the students, not just 4 years old, but to all the students that, Christopher Columbus came. Yeah, he was, he was believed that he was a hero. But what the best thing we can do, Rachel, is to talk about it and process it with our kids and say, yeah, he came in. Yes, he did this, but we can do some things differently, and let's process the information. How does it make you feel that he came to this country and he did what he did? You know what I'm saying? Just process it with them.
Yeah, I can say, that he wasn't very nice to the people that were already here, and we have to be nice to people, and he wasn't very nice, and that's what they can understand. But thank you. Yeah, it's really hard.
It is really hard, especially because they don't understand what's going on. But they do understand one thing. They understand whether or not you accept them as a teacher because of who they are, right? And
Right.
because you love them no matter what.
Yes.
That's important, Rachel. Go ahead.
You.
Oh, you're welcome. Anybody else?
I also think it's important with that she is telling them that there were people here when he got here. I think even when you say that to them, more than anything, that no matter what they've heard before, it just deconstructs a lot already. It's like people already here. No, so anything about discovering cannot have taken place if there were people here already.
America has been terrorized since that day. Terrorists came from Europe, and this is what's happening. And they don't say that it's a terrorism, right? Why? Because it's the dominant culture. And winners are the ones who write history. That cannot happen anymore because we are diminishing and disrespecting those group of people who are different, who came and they had to be pushed and killed just to get their land, including women. Because if one of the things that a lot of people do not know about this is that the Salem burning, the Salem in Salem, Massachusetts, They burned women for the simple thing, politically. You know why? Because they own land. And they accused them of being witches, because that way the governor could burn them and take over their land. And that's what they did to the Native Americans, bringing Africans from Africa to here to work this land for them. Again, we need to understand that we, as white teachers, have to have the responsibility not only to inform the right information, but to build up relationships in the classroom, because it's so important that our kids and our families feel that they belong, that this is not targeting them, that our education is going, we just rise together. We will do this together, not divided, because that's a very important information that our kids are getting in the classroom. And our teachers need a lot of support. Our white teachers need support to understand what's going on. It's very important for them to be supported and to be treated as, okay, human beings, that they got the wrong information. How do we turn it around? And how do they feel that they belong with us, minority and people of color? Anybody else that want to say something in the class? Gabby, Nicole, Monica, Marissa?
I have a couple comments, actually. I've really enjoyed listening. I was in the last session as well. And things that came to mind when I was listening to you and to other participants, I was thinking about my students. I work with English learners, and I think a lot of the teachers that also work with my students, but in the main content classrooms, don't take into consideration the cultures that these students are coming from, and they see them from their white dominant culture point of view, and they think, oh, this student isn't speaking up, or this student doesn't do well with group work, or they just kind of label them as maybe being less successful as the other students, but not taking into consideration that perhaps their home culture doesn't really allow for that, or it's maybe seen as disrespectful to question the teacher, or it's been challenging for me to kind of try to re-educate my colleagues to just remember that what they're hoping that all students will be able to do isn't necessarily what those students have always been asked to do, and that they need to be more open-minded and, I guess, accepting and kind of guiding students towards what we want our students to be able to do.
And Monica, it goes back to the same thing. They're afraid. Okay, they are afraid because they don't know. They have this idea that, you know, people of color are coming to take their power away from them, and therefore, why should I be flexible and allow myself to learn something that they came to this country, they should learn? Yeah. That's not true. You came to this country, you pushed us out, and you utilize the resources. It is time for us to get together and bring all our kids together, bring them out of this mentality that we're less because of the color of the skin, or the fact that we have an accent, or our culture is different than the white culture.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Anybody else that want to say anything, or comments or questions about the brain, the trauma of being a minority in a classroom of majority educators?
I do want to say we have about 5 minutes left. And I also want to add that I thought about that. I'm library, so I don't have all the work that classroom teachers have, and it makes me appreciate even more when I get to go into the classrooms. But it also makes the fact that I work in schools that are about 90% students of color. Most of the students are Puerto Rican. It makes it so that their abilities and their participation and their sharing, all of their work is something that we should appreciate even more, considering everything that they are dealing with and all the trauma that you just talked about and everything that they're dealing with. And then the class on top of that. So we have the racial things, we have the class aspects, we have the sometimes language issues. There are so many things involved, and the fact that so many of our students, and even the students who aren't, we don't think are participating as much, the fact that they show up at all, that they can be there at all, is pretty amazing. And then speaking to a little bit of what Monica said, having teachers consider different ways to show student knowledge and growth is obviously very important, considering how students, different ways students come to us, cultural and other needs.
Ashanta, the bottom line, and I believe that, I love what you just said. The bottom line is that we all want to feel that we belong, and if the teacher does not accept us for who we are, then who will? Because our parents love us. And sometimes these kids that they come from another country, right? They come without parents, or parents have died. So they have nobody. And the teachers are, to them, everything that means to be loved. So we need to make sure that all teachers have the skills to deal with the situation of trauma, racial inequality, and also equalizing that all teachers of color and white teachers need to work together in order to bring it, in order to bring all the kids up into the educational system. Anybody else want to say something? Thank you, Ashanta. That's wonderful. That's great. That's awesome. Anybody else want to say something or share?
Isabel had to go, but she did add in the chat that she's been reading My Grandmother's Hands, which is about healing through racial trauma, and it provides opportunities for healing. So she did add that before she.
That's awesome. Thank you. I don't know why I cannot see it. It's not.
I just have something quick. I work in a severely disabled classroom. I work with students with severe disabilities, and I feel that they have a lot of challenges as well.
Yeah.
They're always accepted, whether it's because they may look different, they may communicate differently. And I feel like they struggle with a lot of the same barriers. I also have several students of color in my classroom, so I feel like there's even more, and that I can't imagine. But I feel like my paraprofessionals and other special ed teachers, we all do our best to get them out there, but it's extremely difficult to have them socialize and engage and just be a part. I think it was, I don't know if it was Monica or Isabel, but just being accepted. I mean, it's extremely difficult, and we do our best, but I don't know. I mean, they definitely have similar barriers. Definitely not the same, but similar.
Yes, definitely. And Danielle, let me share something with you. Also, what works a lot is to allow other kids from a regular classroom to come into your classroom, and allow them to be accepted into the regular classroom.
And because we have that, it was awesome. And now with COVID, it's so hard because
I know.
All the progress that we made. I mean, I'm glad, I'm lucky I'm in person. I love it. Remote was horrible, but it's just so hard because now everybody is so separate.
Right.
And it makes it really difficult.
Yeah, and especially your kids because of their immune system. Mm-hmm. So we need to be very, very careful. However, in the future, Hopefully we can connect with other classes that you have there and bring the kids in to your class and then bring your kids out to the other class. The whole thing is, how do we minimize the fact that the kids are disabled? You know what I mean? Are different.
It's 11:40 now. Just wanted to.
Oh, how time goes by when you're having fun.
I know.
Guys, you've been so wonderful. I love it. I love it.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Esperanze.
Thank you. And if any questions, please just let me know, okay? And have a wonderful weekend.